Hello everyone. So I think we'll get started. Good evening and thanks a lot for actually coming here for the June meetup of Living in Space. Actually, I just realized one thing today. June 29th is sort of a special day for LA. It is supposed to be the day with the latest sunset for entire 2017. It does not coincide with the summer solstice, and I just found that aerospace event happening on that day is a coincidence, but it's a good thing. Anyway, so on the day of the latest sunset, on that note, I am Srinath Ravichandran, a co-founder of an organization called Space Cooperative. I have with me two of my colleagues, Braden and Patrick. We also have another co-founder, Yalda, who is joining us on live stream now from Germany. She's not able to be here because she has been traveling the world doing presentations on our behalf. So yes, I think that's it about introductions. Before I get on with what the meetup is going to be about, I do see a few familiar faces, but I have to use this opportunity to thank three important organizations here. First one of them being Innovate Pasadena. Without them, this event won't be happening. They have given us a lot of support financially and in terms of other resources as well. So thank you, Innovate Pasadena. And then we have Cross Campus, which is where you all are. Obviously, thank you for the location and with all the promotions that we get from you. Definitely, it adds to a sign-up list once you send out a newsletter about us. And finally, C-SPAN is here, which is a new thing for us. I'm glad that they found us interesting enough to be on TV. So you're all going to be on TV. I did leave a filming notice outside just in case you didn't know that. So with that said, let me get into the meetup a bit before I leave it to our speakers who are actually really incredibly accomplished. But before that, what is our Living in Space meetup? When we thought about it here, we wanted to make it a forum where people from all cross sections of any profession can come and discuss and collaborate about what it actually means to be living in space. So just we focus on two important things actually in all of our meetups. One of them is we want to stress on the point that living in space is more than about just aerospace engineers and scientists talking about astronautics and aeronautics. It means building entire communities where humans can live happily and for long, which means you're going to need social scientists, you're going to need economists, you're going to need doctors, you're going to need educators, name it, and we want all of them to be a part of this discussion. So that's one thing, and that's why most of our talks have two aspects to them. One is a technical core aerospace aspect, and one is probably something with a human side to it. And today we're going to have Dr. Susan talk about that and Brent talk about the aerospace side. And finally, I think the second point I was going to talk about was that we really want this to be extremely interactive. We do have our sessions organized that way for a particular reason. So there are small sessions where we'll encourage people to actually participate. So please do participate. This event is not just about the organizers and the speakers, it's also about the audience. So please do make this a collaborative conversation. So on that note, today's meetup, we have two guest speakers, as I said, who are incredibly accomplished. One of them is Dr. Susan Jewell and other is Brent Sherwood. We have a bit of a last-minute lineup change because of technicality with PowerPoints. So we're going to have Brent speak first, and then it's going to be an interactive session. And after that, we have a little bit of a mini jam session. Brent will explain what that is. So without further ado, let me just introduce Brent and his accomplishments before I actually hand over the mic to him. And I'm going to read this out of a piece of paper because I don't want to miss out on this list. So Brent is actually a space architect. He has 29 years of experience in the industry, 17 of which was with Boeing and 12 with JPL. In Boeing, he has been leading teams for concept engineering for human exploration of Mars and Moon. Here in JPL, which is where he is right now, he's a program manager for the Planetary Mission Formulation team. He funds and coaches teams that create and propose mission concepts to NASA. He has published over 50 papers on exploration, development, and settlement in space. He is an author of a book called Out of This World, The New Field of Space Architecture. And he's also the vice chair of AIAA, and he's on the board of American Astronautical Society. So we are really glad to have someone this incredibly experienced in aerospace with us today. So I'll give the mic to him now.
Does this work? Oh, yes, it does. I'm not used to using a mic, but because C-SPAN is here, I think I have to. So we'll see how that goes. I apologize if volume goes in and out. I use my hands a lot. Thanks for being here and being interested in living in space. It's not what I do for my day job, as you just heard, but it is what I used to do for my earlier day job in my first career, and it's my first love, and it's why I got into space in the first place. And so I love to think about it and talk about it and argue about it, and hopefully we'll do a little bit of that in the jam session, which is the purpose of it. I'm here to talk to you today about a topic that's not talked about a lot today, which is the moon, and what humanity could, perhaps should, do on the moon. Normally we hear about Mars. I'm not going to talk very much, if at all, about Mars tonight. I find it uninteresting. You can ask me about that in Q&A. On this first chart, you see something. Let me see if I can get the laser going here. Maybe this is off. There we go. This is the Earth-Moon system to scale. So for those of you who might want to go to a planet someday, this is a planet that you could go to. It takes 3 days, and 12 people have been there, and there will be more in the future, and they won't all speak English. In fact, the ones who will be back there soonest probably speak a language that's extremely hard for us to learn, and very few people learn it because it's spoken on the other side of the world. But this is a remarkable thing in the solar system, which is a double planet system, really. Our moon is far, far larger compared to Earth than most moons are compared to their host planets. And there's a whole scientific set of hypotheses about how the moon came to be, why it's there. There's a whole other set of hypotheses about what it consists of and how it operates as a planet, how it functions as a planet. But there's many years ago, there was an author and a visionary who published about the human development of space, Kraft Erica. Some of you may have read his work, and he was fond of saying, if God intended man to explore space, he would have given him a moon. And in fact, we have one. So my purpose tonight is to give you a sense of the kinds of things that could happen. And what I want to argue is that the reason they're relevant for you is not only could they happen, they could actually happen in our lifetime, in your lifetime, even in my lifetime. And so that's exciting to think about, contrasted with many things people talk about that will almost certainly not happen in your lifetime. All right. So what is Moon Village? Okay, this is Jan Werner. He's the head of the European Space Agency, Director General. And he had an amazing vision a couple of years ago, which he called Moon Village. It doesn't mean, as he's fond of saying, a place with a church and a town hall and so forth. What it is what you see here. It's the notion that, that multiple actors, by which he means governments, companies, investors, and so forth, can all come together but do their own thing in a place where they share resources and capabilities, which gives them safety and critical mass. In my analysis, I conclude that it's not really a single location. There's probably a network of locations that are linked through transportation systems. But this is a very compelling vision, and it's compelling not just technically, but particularly for the reason that he's promoting it, which is it is more practical for the global spacefaring community than a humans to Mars mission or vision. And the reason for that is that virtually every player in space today can participate directly in a moon village. That's a remarkable thing. It's a very European, kind of modern Western concept. And this is not a nation, one or a couple nations beating their chests and trying to outcompete each other for flags and footprints and headlines and so forth. This is a community of nations and commercial players operating together, supporting each other, providing each other services in a community, which kind of sounds a lot like what we do on Earth, right? So it has a kind of normalcy about it in human civilization. All right, so what a weird place for a village, right? However you define a village. It's a pretty desolate place. And so, you know, Buzz coined the phrase magnificent desolation. I'm sure it's even more magnificent when you're standing there, and I hope to do so someday. But even in photos, it's pretty magnificent. So as an architect, I want to talk a little bit about some of the really strange places that we build cities. The first thing I want to say about this is, as you heard a little bit from my bio, I've thought about this and written about this for a lot of years. So if you're interested, there's a whole lot of papers going back many, many years that we can hook you up with where you can learn more about this. But let's talk about where cities happen. So here's one on the Arabian Peninsula called Ubar that was lost for many, many years. It was a city of legend, actually, until, in fact, it was discovered by imagery from space at an intersection of trade routes in what is now the desert, but was once a karst limestone environment full of water and so forth. But it had the unfortunate attribute that they built the fortress over top of this karst. And karst, as you probably know, is hollow. It's limestone caverns. Most of Florida is karst. The area under the Arecibo telescope in Puerto Rico is karst. That's what makes the shape where the radar dish is. And so it collapsed into the underground caverns one day and then spawned the legend of Ubar. Here's one. This is Machu Picchu in Peru. This was the educational city in which the captive offspring of, or the offspring of rulers of nations or states that had been captured by the Inca Empire were sent to be indoctrinated into Inca philosophy. But it's a very strange place because it's built on the top of a mountain overlooking a river far down the Urubamba River in a valley next to the sacred valley of the Incas on purpose to be inaccessible. And so that its location was hidden so well that the conquistadores never found it. Why would you build a city there? Here's Akrotiri. It was right here. It's a Minoan settlement, 1,000 years before the Greeks. It had the unfortunate characteristic of having been built on a volcano, which then blew up in about 1600 BC, perhaps leading to the legend of Atlantis. And now, you know, as people are wont to do, we're building a new settlement right there on the edge. This is Santorini, for those who've been there. In the US, we have a habit of building cities in swamps. I've lived in both of these places. That's Houston, that's Washington, DC. Sometimes we even build cities underwater, under sea level. This is New Orleans. You could say the same about a lot of Holland. Here's where we are right now. Today, you know, Pasadena is right about there. This is a very seismically active, arid region that needs water from other parts of the state and other states in order to support our lifestyle. This was the station fire in 2009, for those who may remember. And here's one, a city of about 2,000 people that happens to be on the north slope of Alaska. You all know why this city is here, right? And the point is that cities occur where there's economic activity. That's why they grow where they grow. So if we're going to contemplate any kind of settlement on another planet, any planet, even a very close planet like the moon, you have to ask the fundamental question of who's going to pay to stick a city on another planet. Because if you can't answer this question, it's not going to happen. And that's just a harsh fact of life. It's not the laws of physics. Alas, it's the laws of economics, and they're just as inviolable as the laws of physics. All right, so here's what's interesting about a moon village or a settlement on the moon. There are 4 types of things that you can use people for in space, and here they are. There's the one that the U.S. government has only ever been interested in, which is exploring. Right? There's the one that most people who are space enthusiasts actually mean when they're enthusiastic about space, which is getting the chance to go and experience it, feel it, see it, witness it, participate in it, and write about it. There's an activity that a few enthusiasts are persistently interested in, which is extracting resources from it for the benefit of Earth. We can talk about space solar power, we can talk about minerals, etc. And then finally, there's an even smaller group of people who probably want to actually just go and live in various places. Right, so you can explore, experience, exploit, or settle, expand. Right, those are the only 4 that I've come up with in years of thinking about this. And you can fit everything that everybody talks about in the literature into one of those bins. The fascinating thing about the moon is that you can advance all 4 of these in that one place. And it's the only place for as a human destination in the solar system where all 4 can come to play. So in the analysis I published last year, there are 6 principles that I think govern Moon Village activities. The first is about science. It turns out that, surprise, surprise, lunar science is fundamental. Well, you all knew this because on Star Trek, there's only 3 colors of shirts, right? There's the command color, there's the engineering color, and there's the science color. And all the really interesting stuff is in the science color, the blue shirt, for those who may not be Star Trek fans. That's why it's blue here. But it's fundamental because we know basically nothing about 1/6 gravity. And you know that kind of hopping gait you see in the videos of Apollo astronauts? That's not because of 1/6 gravity. It's because their suits were so stiff from the pressure inside that they couldn't bend their joints. So we don't even know how people walk in 1/6 G, let alone all the other things you have to do to be a person in an environment like that. We just don't know. Next is what I call the practicum. That's because we know nothing about 1/6 G or operating on a planetary surface in a vacuum with temperature extremes for extended periods of time. All the little things you need to know about how industrial processes work and how systems behave and how humans operate and how biology works in that environment is pivotal. Because you may learn that you didn't like the answer, but you don't know that before you go. You cannot know that before you go. Experimentation is required. Because that knowledge is pivotal, the 4th principle is that if you have that knowledge and somebody else wants it, you can sell it, right? That's just a basic law of economics, and I think that will become an engine of economic growth of any type of settlement on the moon. Number 5 is resources, and that is exports enable growth. If you're not producing something that you're exporting to somebody who's willing to pay for it, you're not growing. You might be a hobby of a government or a foundation, but you're not going to grow. You can't grow unless you're extracting wealth from something new and exporting it to somebody else who's interested in it. And 6 is for these visions that we see in paintings of lunar settlements and so forth, to get to that level of sophistication, even a city of 2,000 like Prudhoe Bay on the North Slope in Alaska, you need a settlement orientation. That governs your choices about things like life support technologies. Is it physical chemical or does it need to be biologically based? Which is more scalable? Which is more robust, right? It does govern your choices about construction materials and where you get them and what you bring from home or not. Conversely, if you don't choose to have a settlement orientation at the beginning, that lowers the bar for all the kinds of things you have to do, because you can just bring stuff from home, which is far, far cheaper than developing it there or expecting to depend on it there. So those 6 findings or principles came from a set of findings in my analysis, and I'm not going to bore you with all 12 of them. I'm just going to show you a couple that I think are particularly provocative. Finding number 1, technically, we could do it. We, meaning the global aerospace enterprise with the capabilities that exist around the world, we could do it. All right, so here's a comparison. Here's the International Space Station, the largest peacetime, high-tech, international collaboration in human history. An amazing accomplishment. If you reduce it to its essence, it's power production, it's laboratories, it's HAB modules, and it's some way of getting back and forth. Earth to orbit, return to Earth, shuttle. It doesn't have to be a shuttle, it could be a Soyuz, for example, or a Dragon, but it's some kind of shuttle. All right, so what's a moon village? A moon village is all those things, plus 4 things we do not have today. A way to get back and forth between the Earth and the moon, a way to get down to the surface and back up from the surface of the moon, a way to move around and move stuff around and build things and maintain things, just like equipment we have today on Earth, but for lunar conditions. And then a way to extract materials from what we find there, the materials that we find there, which is dirt and rock, to make things. So this alone tells you that if this thing cost $100 billion, even because we have most of these things, if this only cost, I don't know, $50 billion, you know, half the price of the first one, then you got to spend a whole other program to get this stuff. This itself is the reason why humans to Mars is unaffordable and will remain so. Because all these things are necessary for Mars as well, and Mars is really, really far away. Okay, but here's finding number 2. There's roles for all these players at all scales. Okay, here's the big 4, what I call the big 4 government agencies: NASA, the European Space Agency, the Russian Space Agency, and the Chinese Space Agency. Then there's a whole litany of smaller ones, right? Other space agencies that have niche capabilities and have interests and their own motivations. And then there's what we could call, well, industry, that you can just sort of envision as kind of old space and new space. The point is that all the things to do in a moon village are so diverse and interlock in such a way that there's room for everybody. There's more than enough work to do for everybody to play. That's a really important consideration for building a community of practice and a community of progress. All right, finding 4, growth requires export. You gotta extract something of value and export it to somebody who's willing to pay, otherwise you will never grow. This is what I call the top line budget constraint problem. The NASA budget is $20 billion a year, and it's not gonna double or go up by a factor of 10. All the other space agencies' budgets together are about equal in sum to the NASA budget. To grow to any kind of city or settlement or colony, you need money from someplace else. You're not going to get it out of a government budget line fed through NASA. It can't happen. So where do you get money? You get money from other markets, capital markets and entrepreneurs. What would they buy? And so there's some examples here. The in-space customers might want things like propellant and gases to breathe and so forth. And terrestrial industries might want things like special elements, elements that can be used hypothetically in fusion reactors for energy, and then things that we're much more familiar with in the tourism industry and the entertainment industry. Those are the things to export. I've struggled with this for years. I've never yet come up with anything other than this list. What's interesting is the scale, right? So you can probably find a couple of $100 million worth of science that some governments are willing to pay you. You can find an order of magnitude more than that, still constrained by the government's agency's top line budget, for what people are willing to buy from you to use in space. And then the real money comes from the terrestrial markets, right? So this begins to give you a sense of what it would require if a moon village were to be able to grow. Finding 6, the practical stuff has to come before you can really dream too much or plan too much about industrial viability. I just spin it this way. Environmental management means learning how to operate in that environment. Industrial operations, how do you do production scale stuff, manufacture things, build things, fix things. Kitchen science. So for years I've said you can't have a space hotel until you can cook an omelet and make a martini in space. And nobody knows how to do that, by the way. We do not cook on the International Space Station. Nobody knows how to do it. That would be a great reality TV show, right? Experimenting in the kitchen on the moon. You can imagine the accidents that could happen, right? And that makes good TV. How to live, how to do all the things you need for a community of people. And then finally, the thing that NASA talks about, which is preparing to go someplace even harder to go to, which is Mars, right? All of these things are things that need to be learned. Okay, finding 7 and finding 8. Finding 7 is learning those things costs an expensive amount of experimentation because it's on the moon. It's expensive to do, to get there, to get back, to function, to survive, to do experiments. All that stuff has to be learned in an extensive experimental phase that only the Big Four can pay for. But once that stuff is learned, once we know what we could get from the moon, and therefore we would know how well or how fast we could grow capability on the moon or settlements on the moon, then the growth comes from group 3, the commercial guys, because they're making stuff that they're selling to each other and to everybody else, right? So government investment is enabling, but commercial enterprise controls growth. So the picture that I'm painting for you is, in my mind, optimistic. It probably didn't seem that way to you. But I think we've learned many times in many fields that the greatest optimism arises from the most critical visions. And by critical, I mean visions that can become real, that meet the requirements of reality. And in the world we live in, where we see things on screens that appear to be real, they're realistic, right? They give us a sense of what's real that may or may not be true. So it's best if we actually understand what is true, what must be true, what cannot not be true, so that the visions we fashion and work on together and toward are realizable. Because that's where great things come from, is things that are not just visions, but they're actually built and they happen. That's how this nation happened. That's how technological progress has happened around the world. Ultimately, it becomes pragmatic. And pragmatism means realism. So I don't mean to be a wet blanket, either on Mars or on our visions of stuff we want to do on the moon. I'm just trying to share with you what must happen, without which the visionary things cannot happen. And so what that really means is taking this place that we see all the time in the night sky and humanity has seen since it knew it was seeing, and viewing it this way. So this is just a geological map of the moon, but it's emblematic of appreciating that this other place, this planet-sized place, with surface area as large as Africa, is full of resources, opportunities, questions, unknowns, and chances for exploration, for experience, for exploitation, and for expansion. So I'll stop there and ask you guys for questions. There's one already, and then we'll get to the jam in a couple of minutes.
What do you see the potential for manufacturing from the moon?
So, all right, I won't back up. The question is about the potential for manufacturing on the moon. Oh, we got a roving mic, okay, so I can use that one. Is this on? Is it? Yeah.
1 second. So if you're asking questions, please ask on the mic because they're being recorded by multiple cameras.
So the question was, what are the potentials for manufacturing from the moon?
So my answer is, this has a different game than the other one. Sorry, my answer is that it completely depends on the utility of what can be manufactured. So one of my favorites as an architect is that there's a lot of native iron in the lunar regolith, particles of reduced iron. It's because of hydrogen and solar wind. And so that means there's particles of iron that can be extracted magnetically and used to make things out of iron, which is an amazing thing. It's a thing that we haven't done for architectural purposes on Earth since the late 19th century, really. And it might even introduce a whole new aesthetic. Architecture made out of rock, cast stone, and iron interior architectures. I personally find that remarkable. That's for in situ use. In terms of exporting stuff from the moon to some other place, there's two, right? One is using lunar materials, including metals and glasses, for the construction of solar power satellites. That's a whole other talk I'm happy to come back and give. But the other would be things for Earth, for the terrestrial market directly. There are only two that have been ever discussed in the literature, and they're both fraught with uncertainty. One is helium-3, because it is the fuel for one nuclear reaction that might be usable in a fusion reactor for power production, although there's plenty of helium-3 in seawater, enough to demonstrate that you could build a fusion reactor, which nobody's ever done. But if you could, and if it worked, and if you could scale it up and use it for energy on Earth, then you can strip mine the surface of the moon for helium-3, okay? The other is rare earth elements, which do exist in some concentrations in some locations on the moon, particularly on the kind of northwest side as we see the near side of the moon up in this area. You guys may know that the most common source of rare earth elements on Earth today is in China. That's where we get most of it from. The most common use of rare earth elements it's widespread in advanced technology things. It's in every screen in all your cell phones. It's in the magnets that make the wind turbines work out on the way to Palm Springs for green energy or clean energy, right? We get all that fancy stuff from China. So we could get it from the moon too. And it's unknown whether that could ever be economical enough to enable a growth marketing on the moon. Sorry, that was a long answer to.
Yeah, it was actually you addressed the material and elemental part of that question, and I'll yield the mic to the person behind me. But I would like to follow up with, could you address possibly the aspects of low gravity and the unlimited amount of solar energy?
Oh, sure. Well, the solar energy on the moon's unlimited, but in most places on the moon, as I'm sure you know, there's a 2-week day-night cycle, so energy storage is a challenge. So as an architect, I'm also intrigued with the possibilities of 1.6G construction. So the big issue structurally on the moon has nothing to do with gravity, it has to do with containing atmospheric pressure, right? 14.7 pounds on every square inch of surface. And we don't build structures like that on Earth. That's like living inside a pressure vessel, only in reverse. So that is tough and that is high risk, but it can be done, right? That's what space station is. And so inside a large pressure vessel, which we don't know how to make, one could build secondary structures that are extremely slender because of 1.6G. There are essentially no moonquakes. It's a very benign environment. And so there again, there's a kind of aesthetic of lunar architecture that's fascinating to imagine. All right, so sorry, let's go to another question.
On which side of the moon will you imagine people landing to live and establish a space village?
Wait, so give that to me again. I didn't hear it all.
So which side of the moon would you imagine?
Which side?
Yeah, because there's the dark side and the light side, and both are probably really hard to live on.
Okay, so there is a dark side and light side, but they change all the time. I think what you meant was there's a near side and a far side, okay, and each one cycles through light and dark every 2 weeks. The near side and far side of the moon are extremely different from each other, and we don't fully know why. That's one of the reasons we need to do more exploration. The far side is much more rugged, and it has a scientific benefit, which is that it's in the shadow, the radio shadow of Earth, right? So it doesn't see all the noise in the radio spectrum that we have here on Earth. And so were we to build radio telescopes on the far side, it would open a whole new window of understanding the universe, which is very exciting. And, but you don't need a lot of people, and you probably don't want a lot of people to run such a radio telescope facility. If I were going to be there, the place I would want to be is where I can see Earth in the sky, because how cool is that, right? I mean, the view is as cool as it might be, and the terrain, it's even cooler with Earth in the sky. And there's a kind of a psychological significance there. I can't remember which astronaut it was, but one of the Apollo astronauts talked about how potent an experience it was to be able to hold up your gloved hand and blot out the Earth with your thumb. Right? Because you could hide the Earth with your thumb, and then that simple act did something about making them feel really alone and distant. And so what might that mean for human behavior and how people learn to get along? And I don't know. There's a lot of aspects, sort of humanistic aspects of space architecture, I think, that are fascinating too. Not least of which is you're living in a place where it only takes one person to sabotage the lives of the entire settlement, right? Because death is on the other side of the wall, which is not something we're used to here on Earth. Okay? Question.
Thank you for such a great talk. I was wondering about the aspect of entertainment industries being involved. How do you see just the development of a settlement being influenced by the fact that it may be just an amusement park outside of Earth? Because you did mention that the baseline and the basic installations would have to be funded and done by a government agency such as NASA. But the next step would be really to plug in industries and create this experience and this new kind of exploration adventure, so to say, for people in order to have money just funded into it. So how do you see this affecting the development of a settlement in a real sense of the word, such as a city?
Yeah. Okay, that's a great question. I think as I said, one of the findings is that you can't even get started without the investment of one or more, probably most or all large spacefaring governments. But that only gets you this kind of flat line, sort of like Antarctica. We have way more people in Antarctica than people even dream about having on the moon, right? And they're doing basically scientific exploration because by treaty, you can't do resource extraction in Antarctica. There's an interesting thing to think about. Beyond that, to get a growth trajectory, I do think it requires this, commercial enterprise. People only put money in if they expect to get more money back out, right? And I think the experience economy can be a robust engine for a travel-based industry that can be a source of revenue growth. I don't know how many of you have taken cruises on large cruise ships, but it's unbelievable what happens. That there are these monstrous ships with thousands of people that go from place to place, and people pay for the experience of being on that ship and doing that stuff. So I think the stepping stone the answer to your question is, if and whenever that happens, it will completely dominate everything else on the surface of the moon, because it will be the engine of growth. To get to that point, a key stepping stone, that's a topic for a different talk, is resort hotels in Earth orbit. A lot closer, the ride of your life, a unique sensation, experience, playing with your food and zero-G sex and all those things. And the ride of your life coming back down too. And the view out the window is the most unbelievable in the solar system, and it changes all the time. So to me, that is incredibly marketable. And we now have the beginnings of an industry that's trying to kind of break into that. So you can envision different futures depending on where investments are focused. If the investments are focused on a project that takes 30 years and costs 10 to the 11th dollars, and eventually it gets 6 civil servants to Mars once, that's a future. Another one might be the same amount of money and same amount of time, but instead of that, you have hundreds of thousands of ordinary people flying in space every year. That's a very different future. And it opens doors to other kinds of futures that the first one maybe doesn't. So each of those 4 dimensions that I showed on the early chart lead you in a different place or to a different future, depending on what you choose, where you choose to put your investments. Okay, you guys are going to cut me off to the jam at some point, right? So just let me know when you want. One more question. Oh no, that means I got to pick. Okay, your hand was up first, so here's.
Okay, well, 32 feet below ocean is 1 atmosphere, so we go many atmospheres to the bottom of the ocean, so it's actually more dangerous to be in the ocean than it is to be, and you were just mentioning being on ships, so Titanic comes to mind. So the question I had was, have you done an analysis of how much 1, say, gallon of hydrogen and oxygen would be worth, outside of the Earth's gravity well, so that, a filling station could be self-sufficient, what would be the rate of return, like how many years would you pay for traveling people out there and putting them up and opening up their gas station?
That's a fabulous question. That's exactly the right kind of question. The answer is no, I haven't done that, because it's a function of the demand market, which you have to dial in what vision of demand market you like, right? And as you may know, most of the literature about the use of space resources is use of those resources in space. I used to live in Alabama. That's what we call a self-licking ice cream cone, right? Because you're getting money from somebody whose money comes from the NASA budget anyway. And so until you break out of that government spaceflight paradigm for other users, right? So that's the key to the answer to your question is, if it's somebody who needs that hydrogen and oxygen for propellant to go to a metal asteroid to bring it back to ruin the platinum futures market, right? Then that's a whole different value proposition than NASA needs hydrogen and oxygen to go to Mars, right? Okay, I think, so I'm not exactly sure how a jam works because I wasn't here for any of the prior ones, but I think what I'm supposed to do is introduce the topic and then let it go, right? And it's you folks that are jamming. So here's what I promised y'all that I would do. I'm gonna read you a couple of sentences that she pulled out of one of my old papers and quoted back to me, which was kind of interesting. And then I'm gonna pose you a question and then hand over the mic. First of all, I should say thank you for your attention and interest. It's like fun to talk about this. Okay, so here, I promised her I would be provocative, so here it is. NASA is a mature government agency. In 1958, upon its creation, NASA was a new agency focused on the scientific frontier. Within just 3 years, it was chartered to deliver a miraculous achievement of epical significance, and 9 years later it did. Those were heady days for a young, technical bureaucracy. Nothing seemed impossible because the impossible was being performed. Upon the triumph of Apollo 11, the average age at NASA was 28.4. So my question to you, and then I'm going to leave the stage, I think, right? I get to leave the stage after that. I'm not going to moderate the jam. That's what these guys do. Is every April 15th, you pay for your NASA. It's your NASA. What do you want your NASA to be, and how do you want it to get there from where it is today?
That's opening.
Actually, having watched the Apollo's land, as a child, I remember the enthusiasm. I think that NASA is an agency that has a great deal of self-doubt, and they allow obstacles. They lost that kindergartner possibility thinking, and rejuvenating something like that would. How do we do that? How do we rejuvenate something where you got that kindergarten, you got that middle school, pessimism?
And we have more planned projects. What we need food, and plants are vital to produce free oxygen that you don't have to pay for.
I think an important consideration right now is that based off the fact that many of NASA's projects are, I don't want to say one-off, but definitely not mass-produced, given the idea of the future on the moon, it's going to require much more mass-produced means of getting there, as well as mass-produced environments in which we can live. So the consideration, I think right now, is whether we should be making the investment in lowering those costs via the consideration of producing many more of these than we currently have. So how to bring down costs, whether we should wait as these projects progress or start making the investments now based off the expectation of future demand.
I think one other thing to consider is often within the political spectrum or political structure, every 4 to 8 years, NASA is almost to a certain extent given a different role. They become many politicians' pet project, unfortunately. And a lot of things that NASA tries to accomplish, bigger projects, are minimum 10 years long. So I think the difficult side for NASA is convincing these politicians that, hey, it's going to take 10 years, 20 years for us to do what we're trying to do, and please align your vision with what we're trying to accomplish, because unless that doesn't happen, budget gets slashed here for this project, that project. Some senator or congressman might say, okay, I want something else to be done because this benefits my constituents, which is a great thing for their constituents, but that might affect the overall mission architecture. That might impact how can they execute this mission. Do they need to include new constraint parameters? So I think political side is a big hurdle and challenge. And if these politicians can see the long-term value in what NASA is trying to accomplish with each program, then it might benefit and enable NASA to move with greater confidence.
I agree with you, but one thing is NASA has stopped taking risks. I think so. I was like a small child watching Cassini and all these missions go up, and over the years I've progressed. Finally joined JPL, but realized that we have stopped taking risk at all. Like now we are so afraid to do anything which is remotely risky that we just keep on doing similar things we've done before with incremental increase. And of course, NASA will never do things which are cheap because we are always trying to do something which is beyond what we have done. So it's always be costly, but we should be ready to take risk. And it's also public's mandate that they should be acceptable. They should accept us taking risks. I think a lot of times public is not accepting of NASA taking risks, but they're accepting of Elon taking risk or SpaceX taking risk. So that's also something which has to come up from both sides. And that also affects how the political people feel. If they understand that's how public feel, they will be okay with NASA taking risk.
So in that case, excuse me, in that case, do you think that NASA teaming up with some sort of private visionary company such as SpaceX, for example, do you think that would promote public encouraging NASA taking risk? because it is true that people aren't very liberal when it comes to spending that much money on something that has a high risk in terms of failure. So do you think that if spokespeople like Elon Musk or I'm not familiar with other private companies, but if those companies get involved to some degree, do you think that would make it more popular with the public?
So, Brent, do you want to answer this one? You might know this better than me, actually. But I mean, we already collaborate a lot. I mean, from my opinion, we already collaborate a lot with industry. But I agree. The more collaboration we have, the more public might see us as a partner. Actually, we are already collaborating on the Red Dragon. JP already collaborated with SpaceX on Red Dragon. But I mean, I agree. In future, we have to collaborate, and that's just the nature of the game. But still, missions like which are one-off for NASA, we still need to take more risks to make them happen. And that also allows us to like advance faster.
How about, let's say, making a philanthropic nonprofit and do a huge Kickstarter campaign with actual goals and with minimal safeguards, not to the governmental safeguards where they're afraid of losing every but actually how many daredevils out there are going to jump over the Grand Canyon or get in these contraptions that they call sky wings and jump through all that other things. So take those individuals and put them up into that challenge with a philanthropic. And so when you donate to the Kickstarter campaign, you're actually getting the tax right off from the beginning. So going back to his white page about your government dollars, instead of directing, you get a 30 or 40% feedback. In other words, depending on your tax bracket. So give $100,000 away in a group, you get $40,000 back in tax advantage. So I mean, it's a way of circumventing NASA instead of being NASA just doing a big international Kickstarter and actually have individuals that are willing to risk their life as we do on the planet Earth already, and just minimal.
So I just want to drop one more thing into the jam, something for you to think about, and that is when NASA was a brand new bureaucracy, right? It was a bunch of government labs that were pulled together and called NASA and then given this job a couple years later. I think it's important to ask what job they were given. So you notice in my statement, I didn't articulate that. What they were not given is the job to put boots on planets. That's what they think today. That's what the whole community that grew up around NASA and its missions believes that is its mission, right? Boots on planets. That was not the mission. The mission was to embarrass the Soviets on the world stage of public opinion because of countries that were in the process of deciding whether they wanted to follow the democratic path or the socialist path. And that's the job NASA was given. It used Apollo as the way to do it. That was the task that was chosen for it to do its mission. And its mission was a geopolitical mission. So the question I think we might want to think about, if we want our space exploration agency to have the kind of centrality that it used to have in life in the 60s when I was growing up, if we want the missions that it does to be bold, as Nitin says, and do some of these amazing things, we have to ask ourselves, what is the geopolitical agenda? What's the urgent issue of today, which NASA and human spaceflight alone can answer? And I think it's very hard to match that up with what we hear NASA's assigned mission today is, right? What geopolitical agenda is being solved by that?
As mentioned before, that NASA is a mature agency, and in any entity that matures, it's time for a life cycle to shift. That said, these days, I think NASA's best suited for defining a vision and providing the earthbound infrastructure, i.e. spaceports, much in the way FAA manages airspace and manages airports, but does not build aircraft. So there's plenty of other entities to step in to build the spacecraft if NASA would just provide the vision and an environment to allow them to explore, and I think that would be a better role at this point.
I completely agree with regard to the political motivation of NASA's founding. And I think that the big issue right now with regard to issues of taking risks is also just the nature of government organization, any organization really within the modern day in today's data-driven economy, where any slip up, any sort of issue can be forever immortalized on a computer server somewhere and immediately picked up and scrutinized, excuse me, which means that mistakes can be blown out of proportion much more easily than, say, for example, in the time of NASA's founding. So it might not necessarily be the fact that time has gone on and complacency has set in, although perhaps that could be an issue, but I'm not going to comment on that. I think that it also simply happens to be a product of the times that we live in. And the question is it possible to counter that using that very fact? So via PR campaigns, and more effective marketing to create within the public's eyes the NASA which we wish to see.
We got time for one more closing remark in this first jam session before we go to the next thing.
And another thing, just to follow up on the NASA being the product of time that we live in, it's also a matter of context in terms of right now there's a lot more tension and a lot more polarization in terms of opinions and in terms of the in-group, out-group, us versus them ideation, which detracts attention towards things that are more close to heart, so to say. So a person who is unstable in their economic situation or in their sociological situation may not be as inclined to think about things like aerospace or space exploration, which seem to be pretty far away if you put those two things on a scale. And because of the economic, maybe not problems, but definitely difficulties that we are experiencing, and this polarization of opinions, it's very hard to make mental space for considerations of things that are a bit farther away.
All right, and that concludes our first of two jam sessions today. So in this next little segment, what we're going to do is a brief introduction to who we are, for those who don't know us. This is your laptop, so what's going on. Okay, so like Srinath said at the beginning of today's presentation, we're here in collaboration with Innovate Pasadena, hosted by Cross Campus and visited by C-SPAN. Now, quick question for you guys, a show of hands. How many of you actually work in some aerospace-related field? I see some hands, but it's clearly not everyone. How many of you, and might be a little biased because of who actually showed up today, are actually interested in either working or even going to space at some point? I see a lot more hands. Okay, so we here at Space Cooperative, and you've met a few members, Braden, I'll introduce in a moment, Srinath and myself, and Kevin in the back on the side as well. What we're united by is a goal that I think everyone here can agree on, that space should be for more people than it is right now. And we've just heard in a presentation essentially the same message. And through our efforts, we hope to make that a reality, to make space cooperative, as is our name, And we're pursuing that in a few different ways. One of the ways, one of the many ways, is right now, one of our fellow co-founders, Yalda, is in Berlin right now after having gone to another space summit in Beijing, meeting with interested people and helping to understand how best we can work with other people to bring more of the community into the space industry and to the broader space community. As Trino said, it's not just about engineers and scientists, it's about the social scientists, the doctors, the artists, the writers, everyone. And she's been presenting papers, and we'll be presenting more papers on exactly how we plan to do that. Part of that is our platform, which Braden will introduce in just a moment, which is our main way of bringing together people across borders, across, well, the entire world right now, to help answer this problem, to find a solution to this problem. Space is hard, and as we've gone over in this jam session just now, it took a lot of effort just to send 12 civil servants to the moon. If we want to repeat this in mass with thousands of people, it'll take more than what we had before. And all kinds of people from different walks of life. So what Braden's going to show you in just a moment is part of how we plan to do that with our platform. So without further ado, Braden.
Thanks, Patrick. So our platform is being developed right now. It's not completely finished. Just keep that in mind when I show you this test. So basically, as Patrick mentioned, it's a collaboration platform. And this would be like the splash page. We're kind of aiming for a social media type thing where any of you could join in together and join a group and start collaborating immediately. So just one thing real quick, you can go to people. Right now we only have 8 people on our platform. We hope to have a lot more than that in the future. Hey look, it's Brent Sherwood. He's part of Space Cooperative.
So it's all good now.
Let's see what he's working on. So as you can see, there's some publications from Brent, and we can see what missions he's working on right now, who he's collaborating with, and let's click the moon. So here we got the front page for the moon. You can see who's working on it, description of what we're trying to accomplish with this mission right here, and did you ever want to read about a human lunar surface base and infrastructure solution? Then you can click here and read away. Now, also, where do these ideas come from? How do you know what project to put on the platform? Well, we're going to have a forum here where you can go to and basically just get a fired up discussion going and start a group here or do whatever you need to do to get into contact with people that are also using our platform. And that's basically it for now. We're planning on launching the platform August 1st. That's a pretty optimistic goal, but we'll see. And I want to see all of you guys on this platform, creating projects, talking, meeting new people. It's gonna be the next best thing, I promise. Stellar. And I want to introduce the next speaker, which is Susan Jewell, and I just want to say a couple things about her. So we had a really good talk about the moon, and I think this discussion is about to get really fired up because this is all about Mars now. So Susan Jewell has been involved in the areas of space exploration, healthcare, STEM education, entrepreneurship for many years, and she is president at Mars Academy USA, Mars Without Borders, and the Space Surgery Institute. She's a space research scientist and an alumni of Singularity University and International Space University. Susan is trained in astronautic simulation and analog research, space medicine. And I don't want to say too much because she's going to tell a lot more. So, Susan.
Schiaparelli Base Station to Lunar Mission Control. This is Commander Jewell, and we're pleased to say the crew has landed, the Falcon has landed, and we're all happy and safe on the Martian surface. Over and out. So, hello everybody! Hey! So you're probably wondering, what was that all about? Thanks. So, first of all, let's put the mic on. Thank you. All right, so I was told that this is very interactive, very active, right? Meetup. And so I have to engage the audience. And of course, I'm really excited because we actually have people from all over the country, maybe all over the world that's joining us tonight. So I want to say hi for the virtual participants and welcome. So my name is Susan Jewell, and first and foremost, I am interested about human life, about the evolution of humanity. And yes, I'm talking about becoming a Martian or to become a space explorer, traveler, go to the moon, go to Mars, go to Venus, go to whatever destination beyond Earth's orbit. That is the vision, right? That is the end destination. But that can change, and it will change. But what is the most important thing about this vision, is actually the journey itself, the experience that you encounter, the sharing, because that's what makes us human, right? The sharing of experiences. And so that's what I'm here for. But also, I am here because I am such an advocate of trying to inspire people. Because why? Because I was inspired myself when I was a little girl. You know, that was many decades ago. And I want to inspire people of any age. Doesn't matter how old you are, how young you are. I want to talk to you about something really exciting, especially now at this juncture in our humanity, you know, in our human evolution, the possibility, because everything's aligned, not only technology-wise, but the fact that people are so fascinated about space and about off-world planets. It doesn't have to be just about Mars. I'm just using Mars as a point in the distance. It could be to the moon. It could be to low Earth orbit. Why? Because after many decades since we had Neil Armstrong first human to step on the moon, there hasn't been that many people that actually had this experience. In fact, there hasn't been many people who've had the opportunity to even have a little experience what it's like to be an astronaut. So that's why I'm here today, and that's what I have been doing for many years. I am so passionate about opening the portal of having an experience, being part of a unique experience of becoming an astronaut. Yes, maybe you're not actually going into space right now, but that is a journey at some point. But before we get to that point, we have to start somewhere. So I am about educating, about empowering, about encouraging, and about, having people be excited like I have. And I have been excited. This is, I first saw Neil Armstrong, that's how old I am, step foot on the moon. And I want to be part of that. I want everyone to experience that. So yes, I am all those things that was just said about me, but mainly I am a sentient earthling wanting to be an off-world, whatever the planet name that you want to call it, a Martian, a moon person, Venus person in the future, or even just for me, the chance of people to go to low Earth orbit. Wow. Wouldn't that just be exciting, that possibility? And it can happen, and happen within our lifetime. So, with that said, my topic today is about, and here's a long title, Mars Analog Astronautic Simulation Training, Integrating Exponential Technologies for Martian Settlement. Now, don't focus on one word. It's not about that labeling, right? It's about the experience. That's what makes us human, having experiences and then sharing it, sharing those experiences and the knowledge that we acquire and the skills and what can we create. That's what excites me. That's what I want to excite every single one of you and everybody out there in the virtual world out there. Get excited because this is such a unique time. Didn't get the change it, but never mind. The first disclosure, of course, you've mentioned, I have been, this is my passion, this is my full-time, it's not work, it's something I'm driven to do. And that's what I want to inspire people. Like, if it's work, then it's work. But if it's something you're so passionate about, it doesn't matter. That's all you do. You dream about it, you wake up, you sleep, you're thinking about it, because it's something that's just a deep calling. You're so inspired. So yes, out of my whole many years of doing all these different things, it culminates right now to these organizations, but it's full disclosure. And what I'm going to tell you about the work that we've done has been supported by these organizations. So that's my disclosure. Now, look at that, right? I'm going to, because I have to be interactive, and I want to, tell me. Just shout out some adjectives or something, anything, some reaction when you see that. When you see that image, and they always say, oh, image says 1,000,000 words, right? What does it conjure up to you? Some words. Awesome. Stunning.
Out of reach.
Out of reach. Possible? Impossible? Okay. Lonely. Well, that's just him. He actually has two there. So, but what's great? Nothing's right, nothing's wrong. It's just a reaction you're getting. The possibilities. Just that image. The fact that humans working together actually got us beyond Earth's orbit and onto another planetary body. Right? But look, it happened in 1969. What happened since to us? And that's why I'm here. That's why people like me are here. Because we want to say to you, yeah, all those words, it's impossible, but back then, they thought it was impossible to get to the moon. They think that, oh, how are we going to do it? But look, they achieved it. So that's an example of human endeavor, right? Determination, having something, a vision that they want to work together to get to, and they got there. So no, I don't agree when people say it's impossible. It is possible, but it's hard work. Space is hard. Life is hard, but that's what makes us who we are, right? It makes us strong. Because we are the explorers. There's something innate, intrinsic about the makeup of who we are that drives our curiosity, that enables us to discover and be curious and always pushing the boundaries. That is pushing the boundaries. But that was in '69. Yes, I believe, and there's many like us. I'm Brent, of course. Thank you, Brent, for that wonderful presentation. We will get back to the moon, and it will be for permanent this time. We won't be coming, well, we'll be coming back to and fro, but I mean, it won't be just going there and planting a flag and, doing some golf games. And no, we're going to build the village there. We are. And that's the start point, right? Suborbital, geostation, the moon, and then, to deep space, and on our way, to Mars, and then beyond. In our lifetime, I guarantee that we will get back to the moon, and we will actually see humans step foot on Mars within our lifetime, my lifetime, who've seen Neil Armstrong step foot on the moon. So, what does this conjure up to you? Look at it. Spend a second or two. Just look at that. Okay, like I said, don't think of the end destination. It could be for the moon, right? But let's look about maybe around, low Earth orbit, where we have the inflatables. They are going to need people with different skills and multiple skills to be able to enable the vision of permanent settlement in space and on a planetary surface. Doesn't matter what the planetary surface is, or geostation or whatever. The fact is, you're going to need experienced people, and you've got to be trained, and you've got to be able to understand what space is about, how it affects the body, how it affects the mind, how the team works, cohesion, and things like that. And as well as bringing in your skills, and everybody would have multiple skills, right? Not just one skills, but this. And thank you. I have to give credit to NASA. Right, I've got to put it down on the slide. NASA, you can actually get these posters free, by the way. But also, what Brett was saying, right? How do you support this if you don't have the financial backing? Well, here we go, right? Potentially to have jobs. And that is, one of the ways that would have to drive this vision. So what I'm doing is, yes, we need you. We need astronauts, and we do have astronauts, but it's so niche. It's like you say, it's impossible, because even today, right, after many decades, this field of being an astronaut is so competitive, and there's so many people. There's a huge demand but little supply. It's so competitive. It's like, oh, it's impossible. I'm not going to get up there. Well, people like me want to change this paradigm. And that's why we engage in this specialty, this new specialty of astronautics, analog astronautics, and training next generation analog astronauts. And analog is a word that means it has some familiarity or similarity to some system or model or place that you want to replicate, right? That you want to eventually go to. So of course we're analog astronauts because we're not actually doing things in space, and we're an analog, environment on Earth, which there are environments on Earth that looks like Mars or the moon. All right, so then we do these fully immersive simulations in these environments as though we are living on that planet's surface. So that's what we're trying to do, is train next generation analog astronauts, but not just being an astronaut. We want to inspire Imagineers, creators, right? Entrepreneurs. Wow. Who's heard of the word entrepreneur? Put your hands up. Well, that's the new industry.
I saw Trade Barn.
No, that's the whole tagline. So, entrepreneurs, wow. For people who are just enthusiastic about space and about STEAM and all those disciplines. Now, for the first time, the whole paradigm of like, you don't need to follow the linear track of, oh, I have to get this credential and then I have to, before that, write paper and blah, blah. No, now you have a concept, you're able to make that concept into reality and make that yours, not give it away, if that's what you want. The future of this, a new industry, right? This will also allow to fuel this vision of becoming multiplanetary species and permanent settlement in space beyond Earth. So that's what we're trying to do. So it's step at a time. Every time it's incremental progress before you can get to that vision. It's hard work, yes. And it takes people like Brent and people who I've been involved with for many years to tell this story, but not just to tell to the community, that you're working in, but to expand it out. That's why education, empowering people, inspiring, talking to people who are not interested in space, maybe, who are not interested in academics, maybe, and say, no, you can still engage. You can still have an experience. It's about providing experiential learning. But in this, because I'm nerdy about it, it's, integrating exponential technology, because that is the future of now. That impacts the way we live, the way we think. It really has changed. Think about it. Your cell phone, 50 years ago, or even when it gets to the moon, you know what they were using? The IBM computers. You saw that movie, right? The Hidden Figures? A whole room full of computers. Just look what you've got now in your hands. The capabilities of that. Exponential technology is an example. So, here, this is a vision. This is a visual graphic of what the vision is. All right. How we get there, we don't know, but we have an endpoint in sun, and that always shifts anyway. But what we're trying to do with training a next generation, or it doesn't matter how old you can still participate in this to be an analog astronaut, and literally here in an analog world on Earth, you can be part of something unique, be part of a unique experience, and have a sense, an experience of what it's like to be an astronaut living on another world, right? And so we try to build a new paradigm. Look, pioneers, we're all pioneers in some way, shape, or form. It's how much you want to engage. But we're trying to pioneer a new world, a new paradigm of living, of how we work together, how we live together, a new humanity, a new civilization. A new civilization, not something that, it's kind of like without borders, right? Without physical borders, without psychological borders, without religious borders, financial. If we can imagine that, if we all work to believe in that, we can make this happen. Here first, test it out here on Earth, of course, right? Find the capabilities that enable us to be able to live and not just survive in space, but thrive in space, thrive on the planet. That's what it's all about, really, isn't it? And so here are some examples of different things that we do, as in different crews, and I'm going to go a little bit further. And so exponential technology, and I'll read it here, and it's by Wiki, I got it from Wiki. And so exponential technologies are technologies where each year the power and or the speed are doubling, which is what's happened to the IBM Watson or the Apollo mission, to what you have in your hands now today, doubling, and all the cost is dropping in half. For those, the younger audience out there and here, it's about the exponential. Really, it's about, okay, it's not the linear 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Incremental change, increase. It's doubling, exponential. So it's 1, 2, 4, 8, 16. So look how fast that you can accelerate. And it's applied to many different things, technology, cell phone, of course, and here you can see, I'm not going to run through the list, but data processing, robotics, drones, 3D printing, solar energy, neurotech. These are things that not only impact us that when we live here on Earth, but eventually, if we really, really want to make it up in space and build a permanent colony, these technology will enable us to do that. Here's a quick video. I'm going to, hopefully it works. here so that we don't have any sound. Audio. So these are, okay, so there's no audio. So those were mission patches of analog astronaut crews that were out in the Mars Desert Research Station, which is part of the Mars Society. Do we have any volume? So just giving you an example, some examples in a visual way of what we do, what we engage in. And so these analog mission crews, it's lit, okay, so it's not working. So this is where the Mars Desert Research Station is, up in Utah Desert. And they've been there for over 14 years. And every 6 months in the year, they have field seasons and they bring out crews, turnover every 2 weeks, crews of up to 6 to 8. And they do a lot of scientific work, of course, and concept development, technology. But most important, it's about also studying isolation confinement, the psychological issues, you know, and the medical. Like for example, here you can see medical EVA. So I'm going to stop this because it's not. There's no audio. We need to go on to the next slide. How do you do that? Okay, can you tell me how it is? Can I get like this? So here, you could see that was the robotic nail, the robot nail that was programmed to do yoga with us, because that was something I'm very much on board with, is how we can develop wellness and maintain optimum well-being for astronauts living in space. And right now, you know, that's something that I think is one of the most prime concern is that if we're going to go way beyond Earth orbit, we have to say, you know, with the delay in communication, you know, how will the crew actually manage to effectively take care of themselves? If there was a medical emergency, a life-threatening, what happens there? What are the procedures? What are the protocols? You know, what are the countermeasures if you have some, you know, mental issues, you know, psychological issues in, you know, during a mission? So these are all very important things. In fact, I should say to you that one of the most limiting factors that prevents humans to live way beyond Earth's border is the psychological issue. Why? Because in the equation, in the X, that's the X factor. That is the definitely unknown. You can always find solutions when it comes to engineering or the technical. You can find a way, but you can never ever predict. No matter how much, you know, you're testing that individual, the crew makeup, no matter how much you try to, you know, go let them go undergo a lot of psychic testing, you just cannot definitively say this is your optimum crew, and under the most severe conditions they will be able to overcome it. You just cannot. That is why psychology and studying human factors and behavior is one of the most, I think, compelling and important aspect if we really are to succeed to be able to live off-world, beyond Earth's orbit. So what is an analog? So what is an analog astronaut simulation training? Basically, like I said, we go out into these environments on Earth that have similarities, whether it's geological, terrain, climate, you know, altitude, that has some similarities to, you know, Moon or Mars. I'm going to say that right now. But really, they are laboratories. It's a sandbox. It's an opportunity for us to play in and do things, right? That instead of like in your boring, normal, traditional, you know, room or laboratory in a university or college. So it's a natural environment that is controlled and monitored as well, but you're out in the natural world. So here are some examples. Here you can see this is the Utah desert where we were. You saw that video, and now they've expanded it and built a simulation. So this is a simulation, and it could be Moon, right? It's Mars, but you know, Mars and Moon, but it's a simulated camp, base camp, and we live in there. And when we come out, we have to wear analog spacesuits, which is what I'm wearing now. We call it donning. I've donned the spacesuit, take it off, it's stuffing. And so here they have a sister station up in Antarctica, the Devon Islands, where they also have a few missions, but mainly they do a lot in here. Now, NASA's also involved in simulation astronautics. So here it's now in the 4th year, and they have it up there, the volcano in Hawaii. So the NASA high seas, the Hawaii simulation exploration is doing, I think it's entering its 4th year. They finished a 1-year simulation in there. So there was a crew that actually was confined and isolated in this simulated analog base camp for 1 year. And they finished last year and they came out. So it'll be interesting to see the data. Okay, so like I said, I just mentioned all these things that we actually do in an analog mission. And I've highlighted, to me, because coming in from clinical medicine, I see that, we really need to address the mental health, the psychology of crews, looking at individual and the crew cohesion and performance, based in, depending on the duration of the mission, in isolation confinement. But here's an example of some crews and their mission patch. It's usually it's 6 to 8, and usually there is a commander, and then there's subordinates and underlings. But every single person comes in with more than one specialty background, and there's always got to be a MacGyver. And how many times have been in missions where things break down, you don't have anything, so you have to have somebody or more than one person to be able to be the MacGyver, right? And I think that's really important, to have that person to have those traits, to be part of a mission, especially long-term mission, deep space, and when you're living on the early pioneers that are pioneering the settlements. So here's an example of what the makeup of a mission is, where here you actually have, this is the crew, the analog astronaut crew, and then you're going to have remote, so just like NASA, right? When they do the missions up to ISS and of course to Apollo, you've got mission control, and you've got these people working remotely, either working directly with the astronauts or doing the behind the scenes. And here's some examples of what we have been doing over the years. So like telesurgery, telemedicine, teleanesthesia, trying to train non-medical people. How do you intervene when there is a life-threatening emergency and you cannot have communication to the outside, to mission control? What do you do? What are the protocols? We have to develop these measurements. So hopefully, do you think I'm going to get any audio? It's a shame because these are really fun, but you can't hear it. So this is an example if it works. This was a little promo trailer, because I also want to show you that, yeah, it's fun too, because if you don't have fun, what you do, it's like, oh, it's work. And when it's work, you're like, oh. So no, it's fun. So I want to show you a video of Crew 145 and the fun that we had. Oh, what happened here? There we go. All right. Working?
Hold the mic up to analog.
Right. Oh, it's a shame. We just have to imagine it. I'll sing. Okay. No? No audio? Okay, well, anyway, you can see visually a lot of things that we do. And so when you're part of the simulation crew, then you do a lot of EVAs or extravehicular activities. That's outside the base camp, the hab itself. And then we do a lot of stuff inside as well, both science and, I said, food. We look at, how to grow food. We have to also, we put ourselves in a full simulation, like we restrict ourselves with the water, with food as well, to last us the whole mission, right? So if the mission is 2 weeks, if it's a whole month, we really, really, plan that out. Okay, so let's go and so here I just want to go quickly through the medical EVA. And this is something I've been working over the last 2-3 years, is how to develop countermeasures in the medical scenarios, right? That would probably happen, high possibility of happening, of humans, going out into space. It's a very risky place, right? It's an extreme environment. So what do we do if there was, if you went on an EVA and somebody get injured, right? So here we incorporating a lot of technologies. The nano satellites will be deployed. Will be able to give us, referencing to where the the different elements and components that players within trying to rescue the astronaut, right? So here you can see that you have the like an EMR, right? The rover EMRs waiting. But first of all, you've got to search for the astronaut. So you're going to use, I know people say, oh, UAVs doesn't work on Mars or whatever. But anyway, like I said, it doesn't matter. It's the idea, the concept you're trying to play around with. So you have something that was able to geolocate the astronauts, and you got a search and rescue team, go on a rover and try to pick up the astronaut. But then you're going to have to do triaging on the injury site and so on and so forth before you evacuate back to the hab. So there's a lot of things with medical EVA. I mean, I'll list them there, and if you want to talk more about it, you can talk more about it offline or after the presentation. But a lot of things that is important to be able to, you know, develop and implement. So this is a very important aspect of analog training, simulation training. So here you can see part of what we did was, you know, here was some pictures of several crews, search and rescue and triage, and I'm telling you, even wearing the backpack, the helmet, you know, I mean, literally does work, right? It gives you ventilation, and we're going to actually build the air conditioning. And there are other groups. Johnson Space Center actually is developing a really full, high fidelity analog astronaut spacesuit. So that would be great to, you know, to actually don those in a simulation EVA. But it's difficult. Okay, it really is hard to be able to do all these. A simple thing like picking up an instrument with gloves on, it's so hard. It's so difficult, let alone have to coordinate it with your, you know, your crew members, and then to be able to, you know, pick up and rescue. So we did a lot of these things during the simulations, and that's something I just feel that's quite important to do. And then the idea of, like, you know, how we were looking at triage pods, right? Triage is when you have to evaluate and assess the injured person to see what medically, if that person is medically stable, you know, in what condition that injured astronaut, of course, that's the point, is, and then you're going to say, well, what do we do now? What's next? You know, what's the next step based on your triaging assessment and evaluation? So we are thinking, okay, let's start trying to develop some triage pods, you know, when we're waiting for the rescue team. So here are just different ways that we were testing out, you know, to evacuate. There's over there is the typical, you know, crossover arm maneuver, and then we're just being very imaginative. That's what it does when you're in this environment. It really allows you to think out of the box. You have to, right? You have to think out of the box when you're challenged with a problem. You don't say, oh well, you know, well, we'll do this at home. No, because it's something you haven't normally get challenged with. So you have to think of new ways. So I'm going to go. It's a shame, really, because now you can see where we developed the autonomous rover, where this is an engineer inside the hab, and she's controlling the rover that's out there, that they're outside the hab, and they're communicating and controlling the rover to do a search and rescue. It's a shame that you can't see that. And then another thing that we're working on was, like, you know, building. We jerry-rigged, and this is a great engineer, Matteo from Robots Everywhere. He had this rover that actually can carry up to 300 pounds. So we said, okay, let's try something, right? And that's my point is, I'm trying to say you have to be imaginative, be creative. So we built this, and then we tested it out with the rover, and then Igor, the astronaut, and evacuated him back. So, and this is something that we did, telemedicine and telesurgery, during one of our missions. And what was interesting, we actually did a Mars-to-Mars scenario with Antarctica, Concordia Station in Antarctica, with a medical team. And they guided the non-medically trained crew how to actually do intubation on a, of course, not a human, but a high fidelity mannequin here, how to do intubation, how to, you know, do basic surgery, suturing. And this is the medical team in Concordia Station actually watching us, and then, you know, guiding the non-medical crew here, you could see here, to do the procedures. And that was really interesting how that worked out. So the whole point is this is applicable, right? It's applicable when you have, you know, even now in the ISS, right? What happens if an astronaut gets injured right now, even on the ISS? What is the intervention? What's the procedure to be able to rescue? Or even, you know, if it's the medical crew officer that got injured, and everybody else has very minimal medical training, very little surgical skill. What do they do? So this is what we're trying to do. So it's very applicable. And also, you know, here on Earth, in remote disasters, right? So we'll go there. And then, of course, integrating virtual reality and augmented reality in trying to optimize mental health and wellness for astronaut crews in isolation. Obviously, it has its real applications there. And yoga, mindfulness, meditation is something that is, I think, as a specialty in terms of integrative medicine, has a huge body of clinical peer-reviewed research to support the fact that, yes, this actually can be used, you know, to build the wellness program for astronauts in the future. So 3D printing, of course, and I'm running out of time, so I'm not going to go too much, but we 3D printed surgical tools, and then we actually use it in our surgical procedure protocol to train the non-medical crew teams. So, and we actually developed down here is in prototype Mark IV, and that's another thing about being an entrepreneur. We started with, you know, just the idea, and now this is a portable 3D printed printer, solar powered with laser cutter. And so that is interesting how in these environments you can also learn to be an entrepreneur, right? With ideas. So that being said, I will. This is great from NASA. It's not about, you know, you be a Mars explorer, but be a Moon explorer, be a Venus explorer, be a space explorer, right? Be a human explorer. So what I'm doing is I want to say to people, and it's going to end on this story, but what we are trying to do is open this experience for everyone on a basis where it doesn't matter what your background is, doesn't matter how old you are, doesn't matter where you're from and what your religion is, doesn't matter. That's not the point. We want to give you this experience so you can come in, you could do like a 1 day just to say, oh, I just want that experience. Or you can, if of course you get the training, you can come in for a longer duration. So low fidelity and high fidelity, which is what we plan to do, is actually go to Antarctica or Everest and do these missions, but of course, highly qualified, trained analog astronauts to be part of that crew. But for people who just are novice, the kids out there, hey, you know, now you can have a chance to have that experiential, you know, learning and to participate in this. So it's not just for, you know, the very few and for the government astronaut corps, right? So that's what I'm here for. That's what we're here for. It was what Space Co-op's here for. So with that said, I think I need to open for jam session or something, right? Sorry. Okay, so Brent did a really good seamless introduction. So my question is, because I'm such a exponential technology geek, is how can you imagine that exponential technology can open the portal to make us a multiplanetary species, and one day, you know, to settle on a, you know, celestial body. So, oh no, first it's questions, isn't it? Oh, it doesn't matter, we ran out of time. How would you like just continue? Yes. Okay. So,
Jam session?
Yeah.
Jam session. Questions.
So I want to ask about, or I guess it's make a comment, which is sort of a question. With a focus on humanity, as you say, and imagining a human future in space, isn't it possible that one of the exponential technologies is the, I'll call it the microscopic biotechnology, which is going to reshape us, such that by the time we get to places like this, we're not what we are today? What does that mean for humanity in the future in space?
Great question. But let me answer it this way. Were you the same yesterday that you are today? Were you the same an hour ago that you are today? Right? Think about it. yeah, it's evolution in what step, what technology is going to change us, but we're always changing. I mean, it sounds really corny, but that saying, the only thing that doesn't change is change itself. And if we don't change, we're just going to stagnate and die, right? Not just as a species, but the planet. But the planet will always be there until the sun dies. Well, yeah, actually, there is a finite end to the planet. So my answer to your question is, we don't know, but we are going to keep changing. But if we say technology, exponential technology, and think of it in a positive way, because you have a choice. We always have choices. You can think of the bad things that can happen to us and to you and to the world and to, or you can think of the good. It's your choice. Which side do you want to take? Well, I speak for myself. I choose to always think positive. I always, and that's what driven me and people like myself, to keep going no matter how hard, no matter how the challenges or people that's stopping you and whatever. You just want to say, I believe that there's a silver lining in every dark cloud, and I'm going to keep going. I'm going to believe in the good. I believe in the good of humanity, and that the exponential technology, no matter what shape or form and how it's going to come and how it's going to be integrated into us, it doesn't matter. That's not the real question. The question is, do we want to keep changing, or do we want to just stagnate, right? Hopefully that's just my belief. But thanks, that's a great question.
And thank you, Brent, and thank you. So follow up in the question you asked. A lot of aerospace technologies, especially if we need to go to other planets and places, are not yet exponential. We have, a lot of technologies, they start as linear or even sublinear, but you end up doing advances in them that you end up on this rail when they start becoming exponential in terms of the growth. And a lot of technologies on the aerospace side are not exponential for a reason. And that might be risk, it might be cost, might be money. So how, my question is, how would we take those technologies and put them on an exponential path so they can be used and grown in the way we're supposed to be grown? Like, take for example, memory. Memory on your mobile phones is decades ahead of the memory used on spacecraft. It's because there has been no investment in the radiation tolerance memory. So things like that have to be discussed and thought about before just saying we use exponential technologies and make space faster. I don't see that happening like that. So.
Well, thank you for that question. Was that a question?
It's just like a
statement.
It's a jam.
Jam. Yeah, I like that. Of course, that you have your own, perception of situations and how things are. That's your worldview, right? And it's great. And it's like, I don't know what the main answer is, but I do agree with Brett what he said. We got to work together. We've got to find some ways, some solutions, to be able to overcome what the constraint is or the limitation. If it's financial, if it's talent, to be able to work to work together as a collaborative team. Create. That's the whole point of what I'm saying is that you can't just be a little like a niche in your own, right? You've got to work collaboratively and transdisciplinary. That's the new paradigm. If we really are going to create, and we have to this point, by the way, we really, come on, I'm going to say from my own experience, 50 years ago, I saw Neil Armstrong step on the moon, and I was only like, I'm giving my age away now, that's okay. I was only 9, right? And I go, wow! Look what I remember rotary phone, right? But look where we progressed. But it wasn't just one person or just one discipline. It was a lot of people, a lot of components, a lot of factors, a lot of things that went into it to allow it to grow and to evolve, right? So yeah, there is problems and challenges in every discipline. Doesn't mean just aerospace, right? But you're entitled to your thoughts, and it's great. And I think for me, I just say we've got to work together. We've got to be a global, conscious collective without borders. But until we can break those borders, and I don't know if we can on Earth, they're so entrenched in the way that we live on this planet. And I think that's another aspect of why I'm so passionate about, it's not so much like, oh, I want to run away from Earth. And people actually, you want to just run away from Earth. You just want to like, oh, we have what's fun, why don't you just focus on Earth? See, you missed the point. The point is what we're doing is because it allows us to think out the box, challenges us so much that everything that we discover, every new paradigm that we create, technology, it can have direct benefit to life on Earth and improve the quality of life on Earth. So, yeah, we want to evolve to have a new civilization, but that's just labeling. It's this progressive evolution of us as humanity, really. That's all it is. It's just the next step. And the most exciting thing for you young kids out there, I'm saying, so exciting. Just when I was so excited when I saw a man land on the moon, this is a juncture in time in our own evolution, in our own humanity, that we can literally go out back into space. Yeah, well, not tomorrow, but maybe 15 years we could be back on the moon, right, Brent? If we can get everything together, all those things that you just said, financing, people work together, bring the political, factions, or even people who are planet deniers, right? Like climate deniers and flat Earth believers. We still have to embrace them and try to say, okay, why do you think? It's about communication, breaking those portals. Thank you for that. Sorry, I get back.
Yeah, I think we are running out of time, so I'll leave it to the audience for one last comment as a concluding remark.
Give me a great one.
Anyone for concluding remark? Yeah, actually, if you want.
You go first.
Thank you.
Okay.
I just wanted, talking about the whole thing about how these products can benefit humanity as is. I think the whole idea of leveraging artificial intelligence with regard to material science, bringing it into exponential growth or improvement in these technology. I think leveraging, like I said, artificial intelligence and material science can be really important. FEA software or finite element-based analysis softwares have in recent years really revolutionized various engineering industries. They've been an enormous difference, but anyone who's ever used them knows that they have tons of limitations. So I think that greater development and the more that computing power increases as time goes on, it's going to allow us to do some truly incredible things with regard to bringing these costs down and encouraging development at a much more rapid pace.
Mm-hmm. No, that's an important, what. Oh, okay. Oh, there's another.
So I just want to make one last comment about human psychology. So I'm just imagining if we're on a spaceship traveling to Mars.
Yes.
We would,
to the moon.
Or the moon or somewhere. I imagine that it would take a lot of effort to work together, and even being stuck in a confined space would really cause a lot of turmoil.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering your opinion. If we travel farther than the moon, what would it take for people to work out their differences? Because it might be consistent of people from other nations.
Yeah. So like I said, one of the most, I think for me, the most limiting factor to really manifest this vision of us becoming, multiplanetary and settle permanently on a planet is the human factor. The human factor is most unpredictable in the equation, as I said, right? The X factor. And so that's what I'm doing, and that's what these simulations do. These analog simulation missions is that we study, human behavior. We study crew cohesion. We study the psychological aspect of isolation confinement in this kind of setting, right? And that's important. These are important pre-work to do, because out of this you can develop countermeasures. You can develop the devices or the products or whatever it is, the protocols, to be able to at least help you, to manage any issues should it happen, and probably will, and probably has on the ISS, with human conflict. But it's also about, studying the health and wellness. Forget, not just the psychological, but your being, your wellness and your whole, existence, as yourself, your inner universe. It's also about self-empowerment. That's what we want to encourage people to learn about who they are. Because if you don't know who you are, well, how do you feel that you can work with others here on Earth? Like, we have all these tremendous problems because most of us haven't had the time, or do not want to, or are not aware that you should take your journey inwards before you take the journey outwards. And to really be successful, to achieve the visions like Brent and myself and people like us who are so passionate about this and really know that we can achieve it, because our potential as who we are as Imagineers and explorers will allow us this. But until we can break down this journey of a finding self-discovery and self-empowerment and awareness, that's going to be a huge challenge to do long-duration mission and to live on a planet permanently.
And I think
Thank you very much.
And I think on that note, we can close out. Thanks again, everyone, for coming. Thanks to our guest speakers for taking their time to come out here today. Now, on your way out, please don't forget to take out your trash and recycling. Help everyone out here. Innovate Pasadena and Cross Campus definitely staying a little late to help us clean out and hold this event. There's definitely going to be some more chatter afterwards, so feel free to move closer and closer towards the door as everything gets cleaned up. And make friends, keep in contact, and see you next time. Thanks, guys.